So
Sure.
thanks, Manju. Thanks for giving an
Thank you.
overview of 3-3 and 4-2. I know these are the two parts of the standard which most of the questions would be asked, and then we try to answer it in the best way possible. And the reason we put them one after another is to have the correlation between both. Now let's move to the patch management. It's basically patching have a significance because the softwares that you are using, they are susceptible to threats. Yesterday we were talking about it. And when the threats are there, the vulnerabilities could be identified against those threats. The attackers are continuously targeting these devices. And when these new vulnerabilities are there is possibility that this vulnerability gets compromised, and systems that doesn't have the fix for this vulnerability, they will be more vulnerable for uh, the organization, and the risk more increase. That is one of the reason yesterday when we discussed about the risk assessment, there was a question, what is the ideal time for risk? It is continuous process. Whenever there is a change, it is the risk assessment. Patch management specifically is basically risk management. When there is a new security vulnerability, you want to patch that. And why you want to patch that is there is a risk that is associated with it. In industrial automation and control system, there are specific challenges because patch will introduce changes, and these changes can impact your safety and reliability of your system. Since we have discussed yesterday, safety is the most prime concern for industrial automation and control system. Take example of a railway system. It's very sparingly patched. The reason is safety is very critical in the railway systems. You don't have the window where you can actually test your patch. And if there is a vulnerability, you need to find alternate countermeasures generally. So that is the prime concern, that you need to balance the safety and the security. Patching also is, apart from risk management, it's a process for change management and configuration. Whenever you are doing the patching, you need to involve your patch management process. Need to kick in the responsible parties who would take the decision. It also needs to be identified that when would you do that shutdown of the plant, what will be the window that you will receive, the configuration changes that you will make. There needs to be also version controlled, documented. So if something breaks, then you have a fallback option. There is always a requirement of resources whenever you do patching, and that is the one of the key reason that you will find unpatched systems in industrial control system. It is always the situation. Sometimes when you buy even new systems, the time the systems are ordered to the time they are commissioned, there is a huge time gap. If it's more than 6 months, then definitely you will see the systems with inherent vulnerabilities coming in, and there is a patch already available about that. Maintaining outage for necessary patching is also one of the challenge. If the teams are not working in cohesion, typically the patching and the management of initial control system is outsourced to IT team. And when the IT team and OT team are not working together, then it becomes a challenge that when do they do the patching. Patch management involves different parties. It's not a one-man show. It requires involvement of asset owners, integrator, maintainer, and also the product supplier. In next slides, we'll see each of these stakeholders' responsibility in bit detail, but it also needs that we need to manage the risk here. And yesterday, somebody was asking that when we are doing the risk assessment, the management might not agree to suggestions being provided by the moderator. So in such cases, you need to put up the case forward to the business decision takers in absolutely no jargon communication, that these are the risks, these are the situation. If we don't patch the system, we might have these issues. Ultimately, the decision lies on the business owners. So this is the process according to IEC 62443. You first do the information gathering. Information gathering starts with having a up-to-date asset inventory. You establish a relationship with this supplier that I'm having this inventory. How do I go and then check the available patch for that one particular component. Then you have a support possibility either from the service provider, your maintenance provider, or the OEM themselves. You need to assess your existing environment and classify the assets based on their criticality in the environment. This is the background work that you need to do before even embarking on the journey of patch. Then you need to monitor and identify patches. You have the inventory. You can go to the database available online for ICS patch, or the OEMs would provide you dedicated website. You can go there. Some of the OEMs are also providing managed service for vulnerability management. You can share your list of components to the service provider, and they will identify new vulnerabilities against those assets that you are having. Then you identify whether they are applicable to you or not. Example is you have Windows 7 available and there is a patch release for Windows 7 for a specific component, let's say SSL, but you are not using the SSL in your environment anywhere, it is disabled, so that is not applicable. You do the risk assessment and take a decision whether the risk is really high, and the entire focus in patch should be on risk reduction. Entirely discuss this out that how much risk would be reduced once I'll implement this particular patch. If this is not giving you the math, then maybe you push the patch to the next shutdown of the plant. Then you need to test the patch, check whether there is authenticity on the patch, check the changes to be done in the system. You need to create an installation procedure. When you actually install in the production system, what would be the procedure that you will be following? You need to do qualification and verification of it. And then if there is something goes wrong, you need to also have the removal procedures to mitigate the risk. Once the patch is tested, it is actually being deployed. When you are deploying, you will notify all the party that this is your shutdown time, and during this time, you will be doing the changes in the industrial control system as well. You prepare all the resources. What are the network connectivity you would be requiring? What are the key people that you would be requiring? The scheduling and then informing and communicating. You deploy the patch, and finally you verify whether it is working the way you really desired and put a report to the management. Sometimes you also might require training of the people. There may be some functionality changes in the environment. So that also needs to be taken care of. On the right-hand side, you see the chart. It basically tells the involvement of different parties and the responsibility that needs to be assigned to different stakeholders. So this is a sample chart which can be referred when you are planning your patch management. Patching also involves different stakeholders. So there are some part which needs to be taken care by the product supplier themselves. Whenever a patch is available, they will first test it themselves. If the test is passed, then they will release it for their customers. The customer would then receive it. The customer for the OEM could either be the system integrator, maintenance provider, or the asset owner themselves. They will internally test it. Under test, if the patch is passed, then it gets authorized and then goes for the patch management process. Recently, this chart is getting revised by ISA 99. Currently, it have only two parties involved, which is product supplier and the asset owner. But there is a due acceptance that there is involvement of a middleman as well, and that is basically the patch qualifier. Specifically in the case of SBOM kind of situation, there may be a component that we are using. The component is then maybe having an update available. Then the system integrated would verify about this applicability. They will also qualify it. So these terminologies, these roles are going to change in the new version because there is a change in the environment, and also that the patching is different from your IT side of the world. So all of these things are being taken care of. But yeah, this standard is currently in development. It might take at least a year's time to be released. Asset owners, they are, as we discussed, need to collect the information from their different environment. They need to plan the project for execution, monitor the assets and do the risk assessment. They need to test the patch, deploy the patch, install it, and finally manage the overall patch management program. So what we have seen in the previous slide is the life cycle and the overall responsibility of managing that life cycle through proper people's availability, procedure availability, and the technology to do it is the responsibility of the asset owner themselves. Some of the patches which are pushed from the centrally security office, or maybe the organization might have some specified team responsible for it. So they might also require some technology involvement for patching. So that's overall responsibility of the asset owner themselves. Then we have product suppliers' responsibility. They need to identify the vulnerability, also define the frequency of identification, how they are going to publish these vulnerabilities. They need to develop the patch, verify it, and validate. Finally, they need to distribute the security updates. This will also include the secure channel, how they will share this. They will also validate if there is a third-party component needs to be patched. If that is the case, they also test the compatibility with their own product, and then needs to share this with customer or asset owners. A Windows patch uh, updates also needs to be validated by the ICS vendor, so they also need to do this. Communication to stakeholders also their responsibility. They will support the asset owners in the patching. Also, put up a mechanism that if there is a vulnerability that needs to be acknowledged, and they have a process to actually accept the vulnerabilities. The last but not the least is it is also the responsibility of product supplier to support the customer throughout the product life cycle. The new regulations that has come, like NIS2 or CRA, or in US, the SCOM and the other regulation, SEC regulation, they make it mandatory that they need to support throughout the life cycle of the product. All of these requirements apply to product supplier, but also to service providers. So sometimes this is like a question that how frequently you patch. So based on the priority that you identify after the risk assessment, there could be 3 different levels: high priority, medium priority, or low priority. High priority items may be patched within a week, medium, maybe 3 months, low, maybe within 2 years or the next outage of your plant. Now we'll move to security profiles. If you have any questions on this, let me just check quickly. Maybe we'll take the questions at the end and then we'll discuss the security profile. So security profile is a recently released technical specification by IEC, and it has the scheme for security profiles that will be defining security profiles according to 62443 series of standards and technical reports. It basically tells that if you have a plant or an entity that is from a particular sector, it could be your chemical plant, it could be your energy sector, then what are the key areas of standard which are applicable to. Then it also discusses the broader use of the document to provide a guidance for using 62443 standard. It also discusses the stakeholders involved and the organizations that needs to be enabled for using 62443. The last but not the least, the region of security profiling is to do the contextual mapping for industry-specific adoptions for 62443 terms and terminologies. How would you use 3-3, 4-2, 2-4, 4-1, the particular industry that you are operating in? So this is the one graphic I directly taken from the standard. 62443 standard basically specifies the security requirement. Security profiles, which are based on 1-5, are adoption of the security requirements. They are basically subset of 62443, specifically tailored for a particular industry. All the key terms, concepts, roles would be adopted from 62443 itself, but they would be mapped to a specific entity. Energy sector, by the way, is the first one that is identified for adopting the security profile. The first profile is under development. maybe in coming months or years time, we might see that. So this particular technical specification have 9 security profile requirements, and it provides the creation of processes, validation, and applying these profiles to that particular entity. It also gives guidance for developing these profiles. Yesterday, we have seen the tier 1 series of document in 62443 are primarily for the definitions, concept, and all of that. And since 1-5 is part of that, it is not the security profile in itself, but it is the guidance that how you develop the security profile. Out of these 9 practice, the first one is the content of security profile. How would you select it, different part of it, the conceptual mapping, and then there is identification of requirement, what modifications you will do, the maturity level, security levels, evaluation of risk, and finally, the type of the document. This is the workflow that is going to be used for developing the security profiles. First one is like the content of security profile, then you do the selection of it from the series of standard available in 62443. They could be 2-1 for cybersecurity management, 2-4 for the maturity, 3-3, 4-1, 4-2 for product development and the system. We needs to do the contextual mapping of that particular industry. After this contextual mapping, we will identify the security risk. And once the security risk is identified, then there would be security profile again. In the same technical specification report, there are some mandatory fields identified in a table. And when these profiles would be available, these are the 9 items that you will see in that table. First would be security profile. This will be like telling that this is a scheme for this particular sector. Then there will be a title, the scope of that particular profile, the motivation, why do we need that particular profile. If there is an organization associated for development of it, then there will be acknowledgement, specific terms for that particular industry, and then the selected documents in 62443, selected security requirements like the SRs and CRs in 3-3 and 4-2. And then finally, the risk evaluation, which is also defined in the practice number 8.